The Magic Tree as Merlin Missions, Christmas in Camelot. And today we're gonna start it at chapter 11, the Crystal Cave, because I started reading at chapter 8 and now I have read and end of the read at chapter 11. So we can just start the telling the story started at chapter 8 and the end of at chapter 11 and the last stories I can read for you all. Okay? And now first, are you ready for hearing the story first? Okay? Now, here we go. And first, chapter 8, the other world. Now Jack and Annie are exploring to find the knights and get their special things. But there's a lot of dancing people, and Jack is running to there because the sound of the music is very nice, so Jack is dancing. But they need to find the knights. But they find the knights at the dancing center. So Annie have said Arthur the king have told us to come along and King Arthur thinks you all are lost forever. So now the knights are very sleepy because they have danced all the time, and they all fall asleep but give a special things. And they have give a cup, compass, and finally a key. So they have given just 3 things. So now the knights have all fallen asleep. Now Jack and Annie can go to a castle now. So now Jack and Annie are going to a castle. Now Jack finally didn't dancing. Now they have found a special things and a key so they can go home now. So Jack and Annie have gone into a castle again. Now chapter 11. Let's start the reading at chapter 11 and the end of reading at chapter 16, okay? Now let's start the reading chapter 11, the Crystal Cave. A secret door, whispered Jack. Yes, said Annie. Jack dropped the compass into the pack, and then he ran and scrambled through the bushes and climbed into the rocks of the door. And Annie took the Sarlanka's key from around her neck, and she skipped their key into their keyhole, and she turned the key slowly. Slink, yippee, Annie said softly. She pushed open the door. Behind the door was a huge glittering cave. Floor, walls, and ceiling were made of clear crystal. And Jack and Annie looked and stepped inside. The cave was filled with dancing streams of a purple light. It's so bright, whispered Jack. Where's all the purple light come from? There, said Annie. She pointed to the crack in the far inside of the cave. Let's look. They crossed the cave and peered through the crack into the room. Along the brilliant crystal walls of the room was 4 doorways. Fire blazed, slipping purple flames. Over the flames hung a gleaming golden cauldron. There it is, whispered Jack. Wow, whispered Annie. The cauldron was the water of the memory and imagination, whispered Jack. I know, whispered Annie. Let's go. They squeezed through the crack and then walked through the gleaming cauldron. And Jack reached into a pack and pulled out the star glitter lead. silver cup. The cauldron is too high, said Annie. We can't get into the water. Here, take this, said Jack, handing her cup. Climb on my back. He bent over, and Jack climbed a piggy bank, and then he stood at Turkey. Hurry, she said. You're too heavy. I can't reach it, said Annie. Move closer. Jack staggered forward a few steps, switching as far away she could, and Annie reached it again. She screamed the water from the top of the building cauldron and filled a silver cup. Got it, said she whispered. Now set me down slowly. Annie held up the cup with both hands, and Jack slowly bent the knees and climbed back carefully on the back, and then stared silently for a moment of the water memory and imagination to his cup. It was a clear and shimmering. Now we can say Morgan, said Annie. Just then, Jack smelled something strange. It was like the smell of the rotten seed. He heard the weird gurgling sounds between them. And he and Annie turned around. A giant, slimy, and a mud-colored creature crawled out of one of the doorways. And the creature was long and scary of the crocodile, but much, much bigger. He had wings and looked like he had been spun for dozens spider webs. And it was glowing red eyes, long curled claws, and the creature opened a huge jaws and the strings of a drove, and dropping a sharp and pointy teeth, and the creature hissed. A long, hot blue came from the chute from his mouth, and another monster crawled through the different doorway, quickly followed by a third and fourth. Yikes, said Annie. That's the real keepers of the cauldron, whispered Jack. Chapter 12, Fire with Fire. And the four real keepers of the cauldron crowd closer to Jack and Annie, hissing and stirring blue fire. What do we do now? Whispered Annie. I don't know, said Jack. We're trapped. I have an idea, whispered Annie. Let's drink the water. What? said Jack. It's the water of the memory imagination, right? Said Annie. So maybe if we drink it, we can imagine a way to accept. And it's crazy, said Jack. The keepers crowded closer and snorting more blue flame and filling with the air that rose and snatched. Okay, let's try, said Jack. And Annie slipped from the silver cup and then handed it to Jack. His hands trembled and held up the cup, and Lynn took a sip, and the water tasted sweet, bitter, and spicy all the same time. And Jack gave a cup back to Annie. Now imagine we're safe, she said, and Jack closed his eyes. He tried to imagine being safe, a picture of four keepers crawling back to the doorways. Okay, ready to fight? said Annie. Jack opened his eyes. What fight? Jack, Annie? Annie set up a silver cup to the floor. Now, she said. Suddenly, Jack felt he had been hit by a blow of lightning, and the fear slipped away. It was filled with a rage and fury. About to thinking their lungs of Annie to throw the wood fire under a cauldron, and each of them grabbed two long and straight branches from each of them and branches from the edge of the fire, and they raised them high into the air, and the branches blazed with a purple fire like a flaming sword. Ah! Jack and Annie shouted. The four keepers or hissed louder than before, and the great balls of the blue fire explode from their mouth and the nostrils, and Jack and Annie slashed in the air, and then Flurry weapons grabbing the keepers. They all fight their fire with a fire, but their flame was purple flame. Back, back, they shouted, and each of the Japs shouted, and Jack felt stronger and braver and waving their burning branches, and then when out of the keepers told the wars, the keepers in the fire of blue flames grew weaker and weaker as if they were running out of the flue. Finally, one by one, the keepers slunk back into the doorway from each that had come. And when the keepers had disappeared, Jack and Annie placed the burning branch of fern of each of the 4 doorways to keep the monsters from out. And they brushed it off their hands. "Let's go," Annie said coolly, and Jack nodded. And Annie carefully picked up the silver cup of the fire of the cauldron, and then he and Jack squeezed through the narrow crack in the throat of bright crystal cave, and they gave in to all of the daylight. Their key was still in the keyhole, and Jack calmly locked the door behind them, and he handed the key to Annie, and Jack's knees gave way and sank to the ground. Chapter 13. Your horses are waiting. "I don't believe what just happened," said Jack. "What parts don't you believe?" said Annie, holding her silver cup. Jack laughed and shook his head. "I don't believe any of it," he said. Annie laughed too. "That's cool, huh?" And Jack pushed her glasses into place and stared at her. "Seriously, that just happened in there?" he said. "I imagine my fighting keepers with the flaming words," said Annie. "And what do you imagine?" And Jack struggled. I just imagine the keepers going back to their holes," he said. "Good," said Jack. "We both got what we imagined." "Yeah," said Jack, smiling, "but what you imagine is a much better story." A shriek of a flurry came inside of the cave. "Yikes," said Annie. "Let's get out of there," said Jack, and he scrambled to his feet together, and they climbed back to over a big rocks into the tree pit. Annie moved very carefully to keep from the spilling on the water cup. And as Jack pulled it out the Sir Percival's compass, "We come out to west and get there. We have to go and east to get back," said Annie. "East was that way," and they started to the wild glove. Jack went first so he could clear the way for Annie. Without talking, they pushed us serenely through of the trees and branches and moving farther and farther of the keepers to the cave. Finally, the heart of the music then stands, and they all got closer and closer to the sound. All they had kept back into the green glade. And they're dancing into a magic circle. They heard all dancing with all down and joined to again, and they thought they'd never escape of the dance. "Look," said Annie, "the knights are awake, and Sir Lancelot and Sir Glarolad and the Sir Percival was standing just beyond the circle of dancers. They have been looking through their swords." "Hi," called Annie. "Guess what? We got it." The knights walked shakily toward Jack, and Annie could still look at the entire color and return their checks. "We have the memory of imagination," said Annie. She held up a silver cup. Knight smiled. "Now we have to get back into the camelot," said Jack. "We would like to help you," said Sir Lancelot, "but it seems like we have lost the 3 horses. Now you haven't, said Annie. Your horses are waiting for you. They're all other side of the hill, said Jack. Jack and Annie led Knights over to a hill. On their way, they picked up the red bile clock, and they went to the meadow. They saw their 3 horses, and the horses neighed and chanted over to the knights, and the Sir Lancelot stroked the mane of the back horses and turned into Jack and Annie. You can both ride back to the Camelot with me, he said. Thanks, they said, and they finished the clock on anywhere of the stories around the neck, and the Sir Lancelot helped them on the back of the horses, and then they had climbed on themselves. Jack sat behind the Lancelot, and she held into the knife with her right hand, and she held a silver cup with her left hand. Now, can you carry the water without spilling it? Jack asked her, worried. I'll try, she said. Sir Grandad mounted the brown horse, and Sir Percival climbed into the gray horse. And then the knights have started through the pale green meadow. Careful, careful, Jack whispered to Annie. I got it, she said. And then it came to an iron gate, and the knights were still drew their swords. Opened the gate in the name of the King Arthur of Camelot. Sir Lancelot called. There is still in the sound of horses, and their knights deep voices carried a maze up the street. The iron gate slowly have opened, and the Sir Lancelot used their horses to onward. And the guards only watched silently as the knights passed by them and started across the bridge. The 3 horses and rode in a single of field with wooden planks again, and Jack was amazed by the difference between the word and other word. It was a dark, freezing, and foggy, and red clock flapped in the bitter wind. As the horses stopped the bridge, they were standing in a high rock swirl of fog, and it was a white stag. Chapter 14, Return. The 3 knights gazed in the wonder of that white stag. Here, take this, Annie said to Jack, and she handed them into a silver cup. Then it slipped off into the back of the Lancelot's horses and ran back to the stag. Thanks for coming for us, she cried, throwing her arms around his neck, and the 3 knights looked at Jack. That's the white stag, said Jack. He brought us here. Are you wizards? Sir Percival said in the hushed voice. No, it's just ordinary kids, said Jack. But I know it's magic. We got in there from the Camelot in no time at all. I guess we just to take us back. And when you must go with him, said Sir Lancelot, you will get a much faster journey, and I can assure you. Sir Lancelot held up a silver cup to Jack and Annie, and then slipped the black horse. Then Jack looked at the back of carefully climbed into the back of the stag behind Annie, and he held out a cup with both hands when the stag stood up, and tell of the Arthur King was returned to Camelot before the first night of the New Year, said Sir Lancelot. Farewell, Jack and Annie, said Sir Grandland. Godspeed there, sir, said Sir Percival. Same to you, said Annie. Have a safe trip, said Jack, and Nuts slowly bowed, and the white stag blew in the puff of the frothy air, and then it stole down into the mountainside And when they came into the base of the mountain, he drew off again like a white comet. And the red clock bowed around Jack and Nanny and keeping the worm safe. Jack, the stag, dashes around and across the wintry fields. The ram passed, quiet stubbles that touched the hunts, and he ran past flocks of the sheep and herds of the goats asleep in the meadows. He lived over freezing streams and stone walls in the hedgerows. The stag ran up and on up through the starry night, and all he brought was Jack and Nanny to back on the dark castle grounds of Camlet. And he was frozen with the grass out of the country yard. He was caved into the head of near the grove and blew in their houses. And they knew the grasses, and then Jack and Nanny climbed back on his back. Merriously, the silver cup was still brimming with our cauldron. No drop had to spill out. We'd better leave the clock here, said Jack, so I don't trip on it. Jack carefully set in the cup on his ground, and Annie helped it unbutton with a red violet clock from his around his neck, and it dropped it over to Stack's back. To keep the worm safe, she said. She whispered for him, "Thanks for everything." "Yeah, thanks," said Jack. "Goodbye." And the white Stack stared at them with a miserable amber eyes, and he nodded once. Then he turned and headed into the darkness. Jack picked it up. "Come on," he said, and it started walking through the country yard. "Careful, careful," said Annie. I got it," said Jack. And they crossed the drawbridge with an inner of the country road of the castle, and they pushed there open in a giant arched doors. And dimly of the freezing cold, Queen Arthur and the Queen Guinevere and the Knight of the Round Table and the Merlin were still frozen and silent. "What do we do now?" said Jack. "Let's try putting the drop of the water each of them," Merlin first said Annie. "Okay," said Jack. "Come on," holding her breath and keeping his eyes up the cup. And they walked carefully towards the round table. Suddenly the left foot stepping on the shoelace of the right sneaker, and they stumbled. "Jack!" yelled Annie. And Jack tried to release his balance, but it was too late. As he fell on the floor, the silver cup slipped from his hands. Now, chapter 15, Christmas Magic. Jack and Annie watched the horror of the water from the cup splashing over to the stone floor. It trickled into the cracks between the stones and disappeared. Jack scrambled into the cup and he'd pick it up. It was completely empty. "Oh no," Jack moaned. He sat back and put his head on his hands. "Camlet will ever wake up now," he thought. "Then land will end forever." "Jack," said Annie. "Look!" Jack raised his head. He pushed his glasses into place. A golden cloud was rising from the cracks between all the stones of the floor, and the cloud spread quickly throughout the great hall, filling the room with wonderful smells and the scent of cattle, smoke forever, a green of horses and almonds. The cloud rose up and waved out through the upper windows of the hall. Suddenly, the white dove flew to one of the windows. It soared across the dark room like the bright light, and then swept back into the night. Soft, gentle laughter came from the end of the hall. The laughter grew louder, and Jack saw the King Arthur and the Queen Guinevere look at another, and they're laughing. The knights in the round table are laughing too. The best of all, Jack saw Morgan Le Fay smiling at him and Annie. "Jack, Annie, come here," she called. She held out her arms. "Morgan!" cried Annie. She ran to the Morgan and threw her arms around his entrance. Jack stood up, still holding an empty cup, and he ran to the Morgan and hugged her too. "And we did our Christmas not told us to do," said Annie. "Rebound packed us up the water of a memory imagination, but I dropped the cup," said Jack, "and the spilled water, but the water made a gold cloud," and said Annie. "Everyone came back to our life." Morgan laughed with amusement. "You gave the return from another world?" she asked. "Yes," said Annie. "A white stag begged us." "Now, Your Majesty," he said, "we have a good news. You're not too safe. Sir Lancelot and they all come back before the first night of the new year." The king looked bewildered. "You found them?" "Yes, they are all fine," said Annie. "Here," said Jack. He handed the silver cup to the king. "Please give this back to the Sir Land. And this is to Sir Lancelot," said Annie. She took his glasses of key from around his neck and gave to King Arthur. "Oh, and this is to Sir Percival," said Jack, and he pulled a wooden compass box of his pocket and gave it to the king. At first, King Arthur was too stand up to speak, and he clapped her hands and laughed and joyful. "Thank you," he said to Jack and Annie. The knights around the table cheered. "Bring them in," said King Arthur. "You must rule us together." Queen Guinevere smiled to Jack and Annie and whispered, "And now once again you have helped to save Camelot," she said, "and thank you very much." "You're welcome," said Jack. "And someone is coming to the door here. White Stag," he said. "He took us into other world. See him?" Morgan smiled. "Yes, I do see him," she said, "and now I can see everything." And Jack shook his back to the doorway, and the stag was very gone. In the space stood the old man with a long white beard. He held up a staff, and a whirl of the wearing the red cloak and the same cloak Jack and Annie had worn on their quest. "Who is that?" said Annie. "It's a Merlin and the magician," said Morgan. "The Merlin who invited you here." "I see that now, Merlin," said Jack. "He sent us a royal invitation." "Says yes," said Morgan. "And then he put the rest of the under the spell, and it carried into the other world." "No, the Christmas night put under the spell. And Merlin is angry to the King Arthur had banished magic from the Camelot," said Morgan. "I see now. He finally took the matters down to their own hands." "How?" said Jack. "Now the King Arthur says no more, not the underworld of the water, so the ants room to he bride of the Camelot, to hoping that he could took after to instead. And Merlin was often heard of the tales of your adventures of the treehouse," said Morgan. "He knows the both of the great razor to find for the good, and the news is going to give it imagination very well. The two special quite need a sausage in any quest." Now it's chapter 16. Welcome home. I think Jack and Annie are home now. But the time goes very long, so I will read this all at my school library, okay? And now, did you have fun? You lost English country. We come back with another book with the other of the number books of the magic tree as the Merlin mission story, okay? And now, bye-bye for now. Please don't forget my YouTube. Bye-bye,